AI tools can already 10x the productivity of your software engineering team. If I was building a team today, I would hire way less junior engineers, for example. AI is already better than a junior engineer in some niches. In fact, if I was building a software team today, this is what I would do.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Generation AI podcast. If you've made it to episode 2, congratulations. You're almost certainly one of the first people to see this podcast, so count yourself very lucky. But the purpose of this podcast is for us to break down the latest trends, tools, and strategies being deployed by companies in the world of AI. So if you're building and you're looking to separate the signal from the noise, this is the podcast for you. Mihai, can you believe we've made it to episode 2 already? From 1 to pumped? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling very, very hyped about this. From 1 to pumped, I feel double pumped. Yeah, I'm quite happy. I mean, it's our second episode, and we already learned so many things about how to produce a podcast, how to speak in a mic properly, how to do all these kind of things, how to have better ideas and better takes. So, yeah, learning as we go. I'm really excited, and of course, AI always brings a smile to my face. So happy to get this started.
Amazing. All right, so let's jump into the first topic. It wouldn't be an AI podcast if we didn't spend at least 5 minutes talking about the latest thing to happen at the world of OpenAI. Sam Altman is always tweeting something interesting. And this week he was really talking about, I suppose, how the ChatGPT 4.5 is about to come out. Now, obviously, it's interesting that Sam Altman that they're already working on the latest and greatest models, right? And he made the point that good news, ChatGPT 4.5 seems to be a thoughtful human being. The most lifelike conversation yet from a ChatGPT model. The downside is that OpenAI are running out of GPUs. Now, when I hear that, I think, okay, we're running out of hardware. Does that mean that we can't make models better? Does that mean that models can't be as good? Does that mean that the rate at which AI is accelerating is about to head downwards? What's your take?
First of all, I'm really hyped that to see new models being launched because I'm following this almost every day, this discussion on the latest and greatest. And people have been rumoring about this for a while. Like, when is the next GPT going out? What kind of features is it going to have? What kind of size of a model is it going to be? And Sam Altman saying that it's the most human-like conversation he had so far. I think this is really interesting. And one thing to note here, he says that in the context of GPT 4.5 not being a reasoning model. So you can imagine that the most basic form of GPT 4.5 is the most human-like conversation he ever had. I can't wait to see what the reasoning model on top of it would deliver.
Here's
Just
what I
side
want to
note.
know, though,
Go
on
ahead.
this topic in particular. Here's what I think is the most interesting aspect of this, right? They're saying that they're running out of GPUs. How important is this? I mean, when I hear we're running out of GPUs, I think, okay, is this going to slow down the rate of development? Is GPUs as important as we think it is to the development of AI? What's your perspective?
I mean, we talked about this in the previous episode, and without any doubt, the GPUs are the bricks of AI, right? They are the foundational layer, and they are the reason why AI is at the level we know of at the moment. Because in the 2000s, GPUs were the motivating factor behind scaling AI. Fast forward a few years ago, GPUs were also the factor that allowed huge models like GPT-4, GPT 3.5 back then to exist. And there's always going to be a discussion on, are we running out of GPUs? Because building a bigger model is just a matter of an engineer putting a bigger number in the number of layers or the width of those layers, right? So from that point of view, we'll always run out of compute power because you can always build bigger models. We've seen NVIDIA releases last week, earnings last week. The demand seems to be high, the supply seems to be high. They're building new models with the Blackwell chip. It's hard to say if you're running out of GPUs. I think we'll always run out of infrastructure because people will try new things and more complex things.
But when we run out of infrastructure, my question to you is, what happens next? Let's say we run out of the entire world runs out of GPUs tomorrow. Okay, does that mean that the development of AI goes to zero, or are there other ways that engineering teams and companies today, whether it's inference, whether it's training, if GPU numbers go down to zero tomorrow, what happens to AI?
I think it comes in waves because if the supply of GPUs and the complexity of those chips would be infinite, people will be using that capacity. But to your point, if tomorrow we run out of GPUs, I think people will get smart about how do we use what we have as efficiently as possible. And instead of complaining about not having enough GPU, they would come out with simpler models, more specialized, smaller models, agentic frameworks, more specialized. Like this startup that I'm forgetting in a moment the name. I'll
DeepSeek.
put it here. DeepSeek, yeah. They're and we'll come to this in a moment. They're launching. I mean, there was a ton of buzz around DeepSeek a few weeks ago. They've been open sourcing their code. They've been launching smaller and more efficient models, allegedly more efficient models. So I think if we run out of GPUs, we'll see more of this. Companies coming out with smart ways of dealing with the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I also think that sometimes it's very helpful to operate with a constraint, right? If we had an infinite number of GPUs, we may not see the same level of innovation in the rest of the stack. But anyway, this is a mega trend that's happening in AI, and sometimes I question how relevant is this to the average business? I mean, okay, OpenAI is worth hundreds of billions of dollars at this point. And if you're a business owner today, really trying to work out an AI strategy for your business, you're not really staying awake at night and worrying about the number of GPUs we have available, right? But I think our next topic is probably an area that is a concern and a more practical consideration for businesses today. And that is around the future of coding in the age of AI. Now, just to set this topic up, I think there's a few different ways to look at productivity of software engineering teams when looking at AI infrastructure, AI development. And the lens that I think is really interesting to look at this through is the emergence of AI-powered coding applications. Now, if you're a non-technical person like me, you've grown up with an understanding that if you want to build something, you need an engineering team. But this week, Replit announced the rollout of their V2 product. For anyone that doesn't know what Replit is, Replit was founded by a guy called Amjad Masad, and essentially it's a tool that enables you to roll out applications and build products without needing an engineer. So you can literally just type into Replit using natural language what you want to build, and it will build it for you. So as a result, we're seeing an explosion in the productivity of software development teams. But before I say any more on this, I really want to hand over to you and get your perspective. What are these tools going to do to the productivity of software engineering teams?
Dude, I've been coding for more than a decade now, and I've seen the AI wave shaping up. And AI tools can already 10x the productivity of your software engineering team. If I was building a team today, I would hire way less junior engineers, for example. AI is already better than a junior engineer in some niches. In fact, if I was building a software team today, this is what I would do. Instead of focusing on software skills, I would focus on soft skills. And let me explain this in a second. A few years ago, all the people were telling you, learn coding. Learn coding here, learn coding there, right? Because it's the future. I still think it's super valuable to learn how to code, but not from the perspective of just producing lines of code, but from the perspective of learning critical thinking, learning how to design algorithms, and how to basically solve problems. Because solving coding is not about just writing code; it's about going from A to B and solving problems. If you just know how to code, AI will do it 10 times better than you. If you know how to code, how to manage teams, if you have leadership skills, if you have communication skills, these are the soft skills I would be looking for if I would be hiring at the moment. And the reason for that, and we'll talk about this in a bit, in the future, I see a future where instead of having a team of 10 people, you have a team of 5, 6 people, maybe 10 people, and an adjacent team of AI agents that each of your teammates are managing. And here comes the soft skill discussion. The more you know how to manage, the better you'll be at managing your AI agents. I see a future where software engineers convert from being individual contributors to managers of teams of AI agents. I'm curious how you see this as an outsider of the tech world, of the software world.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I think you're 100% right. I think there are going to be less software engineers writing code in 5 years' time than there are today. I think in 5 years' time, an experienced software engineer is far more likely to be directing a series of AI agents on how to write code and what code should be written, as opposed to actually writing the raw code themselves. And for me, I kind of see this breaking down into two types of tools that we currently see on the market. And you and I had a discussion around this before the recording, right? You have the tools like Cursor that are going to 10x the productivity of a software engineer. And that is, essentially giving a software engineer superpowers to the point where fundamentally you need less of them. But then there's also a slightly different type of tool that isn't maybe giving superpowers to a software engineer, but is instead giving coding powers to non-coding users. So that a marketing manager no longer has to say, okay, well, how can we build this product? Uh, how do I get the engineering resources I need to build this proof of concept for my team? They can now just use natural language as a way of actually developing applications. So there's going to be AI tools for coders and for code development using coders, but there's also going to be an adjacent number of applications where no coders are going to be required at all. And you can actually just have your teams directly interfacing with these AI tools to build proof of concept products in your company. So I think that's really interesting. And just before I pass back to you to get your concluding thoughts on this, I mean, the level of demand is unprecedented. We're not just talking about concepts here, but we're talking about the reality of where coding is today. Because if you look at not just companies like Replit, but if you look at companies like Lovable, Lovable is a Swedish company. They got to $15 million in ARR after 3 months of launching. And this is a tool similar to Replit, where you just type language into it and you tell the tool what you want to build and it will build it. So I think this is happening far faster than people imagine.
That's for sure. And you pointed out that there are two types of tools. One, let's say, lower level tools for engineers, one higher level type of tools. And I think this discussion plays really well to this podcast, right? Because Cursor is a tool for myself as an engineer. Lovable and Replit and all the other, let's say, POC as a service tools are tools for you as a business person, as a salesperson. So you can use natural language to do what 5 years ago you would have done with a team of people or with at least a few engineers that were building your POC. And I think the speed of building POCs today is significantly higher than it was a few years ago. Now you can build a POC in 30 minutes with this kind of tools.
Yeah.
And before we conclude this topic, you mentioned that they reached very good numbers in terms of their revenue, right?
Yeah.
This is one stamp that they're doing a good job. The other one that I saw a few days ago is that we have Livable that basically transforms natural language into POCs and good enough products that you can test. A testament that they're doing a really good job is I've seen agencies on top of Livable. So Livable agencies,
Mm.
agencies that are using this tool to deliver POCs to their clients. And I've heard they're also making a good share of revenue. So this is a good testament that tools like this are picking up and they're shaping up the whole landscape.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about where there's the ground zero impact is of this as well. I think people keep trying to work out, right, where is the first uses of AI really going to revolutionize the way we do business today? Like when ChatGPT first came out, everyone assumed, oh, this is going to wipe out contact centers. Customer service reps are going to be gone. But the areas where I'm actually really bullish and really optimistic is firstly, product managers. I think product managers are going to be massively enabled by this. You no longer need a whole engineering team to build a proof of concept. And I also think startups are going to massively benefit from this because understanding product market fit and pivoting to the right model and the right application so that you can get traction and gain customer demand, that's going to become so much easier when you can build these proof of concepts in a matter of days. uh, I just think the opportunity for startups to build products fast using these tools is massively underappreciated right now.
For sure, I agree with you. And we touched upon the topic that uh, this all those AI tools are helping people are,
Mhm.
and maybe people now think that, hey, does this mean the end of the job of a software engineer? And I don't think that's the case, right? So switching to the next topic, I think we and people in general should view AI as a productivity tool rather than a workforce replacement, because I don't think AI was ever meant to be a workforce replacement. It was meant to be this nice innovation. Let's see how it plays out. Research grew, engineering grew, and now we have really good engineering tools. And the point is not for AI to replace N people on your team, but to make them 10x more efficient, or at least this is how I see it. And because this AI can ingest a huge amount of data compared to what a human can ingest. It can do it faster. It can understand huge amounts of data faster. It never gets tired. It works while you sleep. And it never gets bored of doing the same repetitive tasks all over again. A human would easily get bored. You'll start to see mistakes because of doing the same thing all over again. And this is where I think we should focus in on building AI for enhancing human creativity, not building AI to cut costs and replace people. And the example I want to give here is a company, Monday.com. If you're not familiar with it, Monday.com is like Salesforce. It's basically a CRM, a customer relationship manager. Long story short, it's a tool where mostly salespeople go in, track their leads, track information on their deals, uh, a productivity tool for closing deals, and many more things. They recently announced that they're introducing AI in their features, and I think it's really important that companies that already have huge traction, that already have a huge volume of users, are introducing AI in very specific parts of their infrastructure. To mention two things that they are saying in the article, they're building a digital workforce. This digital workforce is there to complement salespeople in doing things like risk analysis, identifying customer service issues, improving deal flow and sales flow. And if I was an user of this kind of tools, if I was a business user of Money.com and I would use their AI features, it would be very useful for me uh, to wake up, start my workday, and already have a report generated for each of my potential customer with information fetched from multiple sources, with the internet scraped by an AI, only to have a nice detailed view of what this customer is doing and what can I do to better solve their problem. And if I, on top of that, if I can already have a few email drafts prepared for me that I can just quickly edit and approve, basically a day of work was just automated by AI overnight. I'm curious how you feel about this as a salesperson. Do you feel like your job is taken away?
I have a massively different take to you. I think that the AI is a productivity tool right now, but that's only in the short term. Because ultimately, right, like you've got to think from a commercial perspective, whereby if you look at a business like Salesforce, third largest software company in the world, what percentage of revenue would you guess that Salesforce spend on sales and marketing?
A significant part, I would say 50% plus.
50% is spot on. 50% is spot on. So, like, the question becomes if Salesforce is able to reduce the cost of their product by 20 or 30%, if a customer is willing to speak to an AI rather than a human, and the customer is given the option, you can speak to this salesperson because most people will prefer to speak to a human, right? You don't necessarily want to buy software yet from AI. People are not going to be comfortable with that. But if I say to you, okay, fine, don't buy it from the AI, but if you do, you can have the software 30% cheaper. Do you want to speak to the AI or the human? And I think in that scenario, most customers will opt to speak to the AI, and most software companies will have a much more profitable business model if they do. So that's my take. That's what I think is coming down the track. And where we are starting now is it's all very neat. It's all very cute. Oh, look, the AI will write your emails. Oh, look, the AI will automate tasks for you. But slowly but surely, make no mistake, the AI is learning how to do my job, and that's what I think will happen next.
Let's say a software engineer just writes code. They're at a very high risk of being replaced by an AI agent. But if the same person would write code, be able to manage people, be creative about what they're building, write reports, and so on, they have a more diverse skill set that's harder to replace by an agent. Isn't the same true in sales? So if you're just a salesperson versus a salesperson with a diverse skill set, is there a difference with regards to the risk of being replaced by AI?
I think what you're basically saying, if I understand you correctly, is surely in the short term, AI can make your job better because you can be focused on more productive tasks and therefore be more valuable to the company. Sure, that is true. But if there are now 80% less tasks in my job, do you think a software company that employs 20,000 salespeople still needs 20,000 salespeople? Or
They
do they
probably need
need
20% less,
or do
at
they
least.
need the 20 or 30% of productive salespeople? Because the reality is that most people in most roles are not as productive as the most productive people in their team. 80% of people will deliver 20% of the productivity, and 20% of people will deliver 80% of the productivity. So I just think it's naive, frankly, to think that if a business has the opportunity to have less people in 5 years and be more profitable and make more money, that they will continue to just have as many people as they have today.
I agree with you. I was just trying to get your take on this because, again,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to idealize the idea that
No, no.
AI is never going to take jobs, right? I mean, technology is always reshaping the world that we live in and the jobs that we're doing. So at some point, some jobs will be automated. I just don't feel this is the intent of AI. It's just a side effect of machines just getting significantly better on, I'd say, simple or straightforward tasks that over time compound into bigger tasks that can be achieved by AI. Speaking about, uh, you asked me if I was a person interacting with some service bot, if I would decide to speak to a human or to an AI. And I think there's a big discussion to have around the idea of how much can you trust your AI? And to to bring the next topic in discussion, the more your code is open source, the more you can trust your AI. And we've been hearing this discussion for a long time now about open source AI and how open source AI is increasingly valuable. What does open source mean for people who are not technical? Open source, over the last few years at least, meant having your source code open publicly on GitHub or some other online
Can
repository.
I just jump in?
Sure.
I think we should press pause and let's kind of put it into everyday language, right? So, like, let's use some examples to anyone. If you're hearing open source code for the first time, let's use some examples of, say, the tools in the market today that are commonly the most popular open source tools, and the tools in the market today that are uh, the opposite. I mean, what do you even call the opposite of open source? I don't know, but maybe
Closed
that's
source.
the starting point.
Yeah, and if you've reached this point, if you're listening, thank you. This is the dynamic you'll have to get used to. Callum is a salesperson. I'm an engineer. I approach things from a very technical point of view. He's trying to approach things from a non-technical point of view. And this is the dynamic we'll always have on the podcast. To explain this in simple words, open source code is code you can yourself go online, read, contribute to, change, and people do this. And this is why open source code is becoming increasingly hyped. The opposite, closed source, uh, I can give you an example. So some of the code that Google is building, it's so proprietary, so uh, let's say so advanced in some sense that they're not willing to release it publicly. But even Google has some research code publicly available for people to play with. So I would say if there's a ton of IP in your code, you're trying to keep it as private as possible. If your IP as a company is not the code base, but the data you have behind or the processes or the scalability, the fact that you have your code available publicly increases the trust people have in you as a company. And open source as a term, I feel like the definition of open source started changing 2 years ago when the whole hype around ChatGPT and language models started. Historically, open source meant that your source code that people are writing is available publicly. I feel now open source AI can mean so many things. Open source AI can mean open source code, open source data, so knowing what data the model has been trained on, uh, openness around the whole training loop and how the model has been trained with this data. And I think what's most important is openness around how the model is being used in production. So let's say you go on ChatGPT, right? And you ask a question, a personal question, right? That you want to know some more reasoning around. You want to know, will this information be stored somewhere? Will this information be kept private? Where does this information go? And I think this is what's relevant to people because people have been building on top of ChatGPT and OpenAI. I think they would be just happier if they knew where their data is going. And I'm curious to hear your take on this. How do you feel about using open source models, not knowing precisely what happens with your data? So, long story short, on the open source discussion, DeepSeek just tweeted as part of the Open Source Week that will come, that will explore in more detail in the next week's episode. That even though they're a tiny team, they're trying to release as many things openly, and this has been their storyline since they were launched. They're trying to make everything publicly, and we're already seeing more and more hype around it. And people building with AI are already migrating from uh, ChatGPT and OpenAI just because that was the convenient API to use to DeepSeek models and more specialized models that are open source and have more transparency built inside.
Quick question. So let's say I am building a business today and I'm thinking, you know what? I want to integrate a large language model into my business, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Claude, Gemini, Anthropic, even DeepSeek, right? Or I could use Llama, So essentially, I've got two fundamental choices. I can either build on top of a closed model that is owned by a corporation, or I can use an open source tool like DeepSeek or Llama. Now, most of the time, these open source tools, they're only open source because these companies are trying to catch up, right? So the best models are usually closed. What if I decide to build on Llama and then in 6 months, Mark Zuckerberg decides, okay, we're not going to be open source anymore. Now we're going to charge for our API. What's the risk of doing this? Is there a risk?
I think this is the general risk of just being a language model wrapper and not building any safeguard around what you just described. So if I was building software today from scratch, if I was building a startup from scratch, I would use as many plug and play components from providers, but I would design my solution in a way that's agnostic to one or the other. So I would design with flexibility in mind. Of course, I would use publicly available, even closed source models. But as I scale, as I provide more and more value to my users, I would also try to develop on the side maybe a proprietary version, maybe a version based on an open source model, so that when the situation is just presented happens with a big provider closing their shop or providing what they used to provide at a significantly higher price, I would be able as a CTO, for example, to switch to my version and provide my own GPUs and be agnostic of whatever cloud provider. This is what I would be doing.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool. Moving on to the last topic of the discussion. Again, linked to how AI can become productivity tool and linked to how people can build products with AI really fast without having to know how to code. OpenAI just launched Deep Research. I mean, they launched Deep Research a few weeks ago, but they just made it available in Europe. So I also tried it, and people around me tried it as well. The bottom line is that it's super useful. And let me tell you what this does. Deep Research basically takes your query, takes whatever you want to solve, thinks for itself, goes on the web, searches the information, reasons on that information, and maybe 30, 40 minutes later, delivers that information to you in a nice, summarized way. And this is basically, instead of you as a business owner, instead of hiring a team to do market research for you, you could all of a sudden employ ChatGPT for just $20 per month to do as much research as you need. And this is just half of this topic. The other half is that ChatGPT launched tasks. This is a very simple feature if you think about it. It's just, I was tempted to think that this was another to-do list app on the market, like Todoist and other simple and easy to use apps. The value in this tool is that it couples together with deep research, and not only you have a team of researchers at your availability to do market research on your behalf, you can also schedule them so that every day when you wake up, you already have a lot of information summarized in your inbox. What I did with this, and then I'm curious to hear what you would use it for. I basically asked OpenAI in the context of deep research and tasks to deliver me every morning a summary of what happened in AI significantly the day before. Last 2 days, it's doing great. I'm just curious how this will continue to develop because this feature is in beta, so they're probably still improving it. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about employing a team of market researchers with just $20 per month?
I still think this is in the early stages, right? I don't think most companies are using this today. I think OpenAI is mainly a consumer product. I'm still yet to see companies outside of tech utilize this in a way that's valuable. I think deep research is definitely a valuable tool, but let's be honest. How many use cases are you aware of right now where companies are using this as a research tool? And I think the more interesting question is, what is the necessary component going to be to unlock these use cases for the enterprise? Because today it seems like this is mainly being used in a B2C consumer context. I saw, for instance, that ChatGPT has just passed the 800 million monthly active users per month. Now that's huge. And if they cross the billion mark, that means that it's a genuine consumer mega app, right? But my question to you is, why is this not being used in enterprises today in the same way that it's being used by consumers?
Maybe it's used, and this might be hidden under the open source versus closed source umbrella. But the reason why I think this is not used at scale at the moment is I think it's quite expensive under the hood. We talked about OpenAI running out of GPUs. I would expect doing deep research on an unlimited number of topics the users want you to do. I expect this to be extremely costly. And one proof that this might cost more than just a simple question is that the response is not immediate. You prompt deep research with whatever topic you want deep research to do research on. It will take maybe 1 hour until you get a response. And this is proof that this might not be trivial under the hood. And this might be one of the reasons why companies are not doing this actively, because the ROI might be negative.
Yeah. So you think cost? You think the reason why companies are not scaling this up today and using it to its fullest extent is because of cost? I have a slightly different take, right? And that is that AI still operates on the periphery of most companies. Like if you break down the processes that exist in most companies today, and you were to do like a flow chart of every task and step that is involved in a typical business process, I think the average business process would probably involve, 2 different departments, 30 different separate tasks for 4 different individuals in 4 different roles, right? That's a complex workflow. And I would say today we have nailed probably the task automation for instance, as we'll go on to discuss in future episodes. I would say today, if you want ChatGPT to write a personalized email based on an incoming customer demand, then you could use ChatGPT to automate and to personalize that one particular task in the workflow. But the idea that then ChatGPT could go on and actually automate all of the 30 next steps involved in that particular process, absolutely not. So I think we're yet to get to a point where ChatGPT or AI tools in general can handle complex, multi-departmental, multinational workflows end to end. And we're really just, what we're talking about here is really just the automation of 1 or 2 or 3 tasks, but it's not really yet solved the enterprise task automation problem.
I think what you're talking is going in the direction of AGI, artificial general intelligence, and we've seen steps being taken in this direction. So if 2 years ago we were only able to prompt ChatGPT text and get text back, now we can prompt ChatGPT text, images, videos, documents, and many more things, and get the same amount of modalities out. And what you're saying is basically 10xing the multimodality aspect of these tools to the extent that they can be used across departments. I'm sure we'll see more of this in the weeks and months to come. And yeah, we'll be happy to cover them at the right time.
Without further ado, though, that is it for this week of the Generation AI podcast. I'm Callum Chamberlain. My co-host is Mihai, and we'll be back the same time next week to give you the latest news, insights, and commentary on the world of AI for you and your business. Thanks again. See you next week.
See you. Have a good one.